What happens when genius becomes a prison? When the brightest mind finds itself surrounded by inner storms, is it possible to stay in control? Between light and shadow, reason and emotion, an enigma is born. How far does the power of intelligence go, and where does human fragility begin? Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about genius and its limits. Before the storm, there was calm, or at least, a fragile semblance of it. Dr. Otto Octavius was a man defined by his intellect, a mind that danced effortlessly through the realms of science and innovation. His world was one of equations, experiments, and the unyielding pursuit of knowledge. Yet, beneath this brilliance, an invisible weight pressed down, one not seen by colleagues or friends. Otto's early life was marked by an insatiable curiosity and a hunger to understand the universe's secrets. Raised in a quiet household, where solitude was a constant companion, he learned to rely on his mind above all else. Social interactions felt cumbersome, often draining. The comfort he found in logic and patterns was a refuge from an unpredictable world. As a scientist, his talents were undeniable. His breakthroughs in nuclear fusion and mechanical engineering promised to reshape the future. Yet, genius came at a price. The very traits that fueled his innovations, intense focus, relentless drive, and perfectionism, also isolated him. His peers admired his work but rarely glimpsed the man behind the theories. Inside Otto's mind, a silent battle raged. The same brilliance that propelled him forward also built walls, separating him from those who might understand or share his vision. Emotions, unpredictable and raw, were often locked away, deemed distractions to his rational pursuits. But emotional repression is a fragile dam, vulnerable to cracks. Scientists have long studied the relationship between genius and emotional regulation. Otto's brain was wired for extraordinary cognitive function, but the circuits managing emotional balance were less robust. This imbalance planted the seeds for the inner turmoil he struggled to contain. As his scientific work progressed, so did the pressure, external and internal. Expectations mounted, deadlines loomed, and the isolation deepened. Friends drifted away, seeing only the man consumed by his work. Yet, even in this solitude, Otto's mind was restless, searching for control in a chaos growing within. And then, just beyond the horizon of his consciousness, a change began. Something unseen, unheard, but undeniably approaching. A force that would challenge every conviction, every limit he had set for himself. But there was something no one saw coming. The moment that shifted everything was subtle, almost imperceptible. Yet within Otto's mind, it sparked a cascade, a fracture in the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. The pressure, once manageable, began to morph into something heavier, darker. It wasn't a single event but a convergence of forces. The relentless demands of the scientific community, the weight of expectations, and the creeping sense of isolation formed a storm no amount of logic could calm. Friends and colleagues no longer saw Otto as a man, but as a genius to be admired or feared. Their distance grew, feeding his growing sense of alienation. Psychologically, this phase is often described as a rupture, the breaking point where internal defenses falter. For Otto, it was the first time his emotions escaped the confines of reason. Anger simmered beneath his calm exterior, frustration grew sharper, and moments of doubt pierced his usually steadfast resolve. The social pressures became unbearable. Every failure, real or perceived, echoed loudly in his mind, twisting into a narrative of inadequacy. This internal conflict was invisible to those around him, yet it consumed him entirely. Research into trauma and psychological change suggests that such moments can redefine identity. Otto's mind was forced to adapt, but not without cost. His perception of reality started to shift. What once was black and white became shades of gray, blurred by emotion and fear. This was the beginning of transformation, a necessary rupture, yet one that threatened to unravel him. Within this fragile state, Otto grappled with questions no formula could solve. Who was he beyond his genius? What place did he hold in a world that seemed increasingly hostile? His actions became erratic, at times unpredictable. The scientific method, his lifelong anchor, no longer provided comfort or clarity. Instead, his thoughts spiraled into darker patterns, fueled by a mixture of brilliance and vulnerability. And it was there, at that fragile edge, that everything began to unfold. As days turned into weeks, Otto's mind no longer resembled the well-oiled machine it once was. The clarity that had defined his genius was slowly being eroded, replaced by an unsettling fog of confusion and mistrust. His thoughts, once precise and sharp like laser beams, now twisted into chaotic spirals, refusing to obey the simple laws of logic. Where before there was certainty, now there was ambiguity, a sprawling maze of doubts and fears. The equations and theories that had given him purpose felt like cryptic riddles. Otto's perception of the world began to fragment. Colleagues he once admired seemed distant, their intentions ambiguous, and their words layered with hidden meanings. The familiar became alien. This internal chaos was not simply a loss of control, it was a reconfiguration of reality itself. Otto's mind was attempting to impose order, but in doing so, it crafted elaborate mental constructs that served both as protection and prison. He clung to rituals, meticulously organizing his workbench, repeatedly reviewing data, as if these acts could tether him to reason. Yet, beneath these efforts, a storm brewed. Cognitive distortion became the new normal. Psychologists describe this phenomenon as a systematic bias in thinking, where the mind filters reality through a lens clouded by negative emotions and anxiety. Otto experienced catastrophizing, imagining worst-case scenarios at every turn, and personalization, blaming himself for events beyond his control. Confirmation bias trapped him in a cycle of suspicion, always seeking evidence that reinforced his growing paranoia. From a neuroscientific perspective, intense emotional stress can disrupt the brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought and impulse control. Otto's emotional circuits were overloaded, diminishing his capacity to regulate fear and anger. This imbalance amplified his vulnerability, making his brilliant mind a double-edged sword. Despite the internal turmoil, Otto refused to surrender. He sought solace in science, believing that every mystery, including his own unraveling, could be solved with enough data and analysis. But his scientific method faltered when confronted with the subjective chaos within. Each hypothesis bred new questions, each experiment a mirror reflecting deeper insecurities. This paradox, the search for absolute control in a world slipping from his grasp, fueled a growing divide between the man and his mind. Otto felt trapped inside a fortress of his own making, a fortress constructed from equations and theories but guarded by fear and doubt. Social isolation deepened. Friends became wary of his erratic moods, colleagues whispered of a man losing his edge. Otto's trust in others eroded, and he withdrew further into himself. Communication became a battle, every conversation was dissected for hidden meanings, every silence interpreted as rejection. Yet even in this darkness, a fierce light remained. The relentless drive to understand, to conquer the chaos within. It was this paradoxical tension between brilliance and vulnerability that defined his new reality. Otto was no longer simply a scientist, he was a man wrestling with the shadows of his own mind. And so, with every passing day, the labyrinth of structured darkness grew more complex, each corridor leading deeper into mystery and uncertainty. The mind that once illuminated the path forward now cast long shadows, warning of dangers yet unseen. But the true challenge was still to come. There comes a moment when the fragile balance shatters, a threshold crossed, beyond which there is no turning back. For Otto, this moment was both inevitable and terrifying. The walls of his internal fortress, though once sturdy, began to crumble under the relentless pressure of his altered mind. Ethics, once a clear compass guiding his actions, blurred into a fog of moral ambiguity. The lines between right and wrong, good and harm, twisted into complex puzzles without simple answers. Otto's vision of the world had changed, what he once saw as black and white was now shaded with countless grays. His justifications grew more elaborate. Each controversial choice was defended as necessary, rational, part of a greater plan only he could comprehend. The ends justify the means became not just a phrase but a belief system. To Otto, the pursuit of knowledge demanded sacrifice, and he alone bore the burden of this truth. This shift was not sudden, but gradual, like the slow descent of twilight into night. Yet the consequences were profound. Trusted colleagues became adversaries, conversations turned into confrontations, and the scientific community whispered doubts about his sanity and methods. But Otto remained unshaken in his conviction. Here lay the greatest dilemma: was he a man unhinged by trauma, or a visionary pushing beyond conventional limits? Was his altered perception a symptom of fragility or a glimpse into truths others could not bear to see? The answer was never clear, even to Otto himself. His actions challenged societal norms, breaking unwritten rules and provoking fear. Yet, in his mind, he was opening doors to new realms of understanding. This paradox sparked questions among those who observed him from afar. What if Otto is seeing beyond our limited vision? What if the chaos we fear is the birthplace of innovation? But beneath the intellectual turmoil, there was an emotional tempest raging, a storm of isolation, frustration, and desperation. Otto grappled with loneliness unlike any he had known. The connections that once grounded him were severed, the empathy he needed to heal was just out of reach. Philosophically, this phase represents a profound transformation of identity. The self Otto once knew was dissolving, replaced by a new persona forged in the crucible of struggle and change. This was not merely a scientific crisis but a deeply human one, the universal conflict between ambition and vulnerability. As the world watched and waited, Otto crossed the threshold. The point of no return. What lay ahead was uncharted territory, a path that would test not only his mind but his very soul. And now, the question remains, what does it mean to lose control, and who really holds the power? To truly understand Otto's transformation, one must peer beyond the surface, into the intricate dance of neurons, hormones, and psychological forces shaping his every thought and action. What appears as chaos from the outside is, in fact, a complex and calculated response emerging from the fragile architecture of his mind. At the core lies the delicate balance between cognitive brilliance and emotional regulation. Otto's brain, wired for extraordinary intellectual performance, harbors vulnerabilities in the areas responsible for managing stress and impulses. Neuroscientific studies reveal that intense pressure and prolonged emotional distress can alter the functioning of the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, regions crucial for decision-making, risk assessment, and emotional control. His actions, seemingly erratic or extreme, are manifestations of this altered neural circuitry. Each choice is informed by an internal calculus shaped by survival instincts and a desperate need for control. The chaos is not random but a response finely tuned by years of accumulated trauma and stress. Psychologists classify such responses within the framework of personality disorders and extreme emotional dysregulation. Otto exhibits traits associated with obsessive-compulsive tendencies, where rigid patterns of thought serve to impose order on overwhelming uncertainty. At the same time, episodes of impulsivity and intense emotional outbursts reveal the fragility beneath his veneer of control. Scientific parallels can be drawn from documented cases of prodigious minds who struggled with similar conflicts. Figures like Nikola Tesla and Alan Turing, brilliant yet deeply troubled, illuminate the precarious edge between genius and psychological fragility. Fictional characters like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. House echo these complexities, embodying the tension between intellect and emotional vulnerability. Otto's journey is a testament to this delicate equilibrium. His brilliance is inseparable from his pain, his insights shadowed by the risk of self-destruction. Yet, within this paradox lies the very essence of human complexity, the coexistence of light and dark, order and chaos. This understanding reframes Otto not as a figure of madness, but as one navigating the outer limits of reason. His decisions, while controversial, are the product of a mind operating at its maximum capacity, balancing on the razor's edge between clarity and confusion. It was never irrationality. It was a calculation made at the limit of reason. What remains after the storm has passed? When the tempest of transformation finally quiets, what echoes linger in its wake? Otto's journey leaves a legacy not just in the scientific world, but deep within the human psyche, a testament to the complexity of genius and the cost it demands. His impact is paradoxical. To some, he is a beacon of innovation, pushing boundaries others dared not approach. To others, he is a warning, a reminder of the fragile line separating brilliance from turmoil. His work changed paradigms, challenging established truths and forcing society to confront uncomfortable questions about control, emotion, and reason. On a personal level, the scars run deep. The relationship strained or broken, the isolation endured, and the internal battles fought all speak to a human story often overshadowed by the glamour of genius. Otto's life becomes a mirror reflecting the universal struggle to reconcile ambition with vulnerability. Philosophically, his story challenges us to reconsider who defines the limits of human potential. What is genius, if not a fusion of light and shadow? How do we draw the line between control and chaos, between progress and destruction? These questions ripple beyond Otto, touching on the very essence of what it means to be human. His legacy is not a clear resolution but an open question, an invitation to explore the fragile dance between mind and emotion, order and disorder. It is a story that defies simple categorization, residing instead in the gray areas where certainty dissolves. Perhaps the greatest truth is that genius cannot be fully understood or controlled. It is a force that shapes and is shaped by the depths of human experience, unpredictable and profound. And so, as the curtain falls on Otto's chapter, another begins. A story that whispers of new possibilities, new challenges, and the enduring mystery of the human mind. Maybe this story is only the beginning.